Well, we've thought once in this series about dreams already and their interpretation. You might have heard today's reading and thought, Matthew, are you sure? Daniel 1, with making choices about diet and growing up in a foreign land, fine. Daniel 2, interpreting somebody else's dream, well, a bit weird, but okay. Daniel 3, a fiery furnace, scary, but a good story. Daniel 5, the writing is on the wall, that familiar idea of speaking truth to power. Daniel 6, the power and witness of Daniel's prayer and devotional life, with some lions thrown in for good measure. Good, encouraging. But really? Chapter 7? Dreams of beasts and thrones, and just plain weird. So I turned to one of the Bible commentary books I have on the book of Daniel, and the opening sentence of the chapter looking at these verses was, "Many people love the book of Daniel, but few venture into these last 6 chapters." Do we find these chapters confusing, strange? Well, we are in good company. If you look just across after we read to verse 15, Daniel says, "I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me." We need to understand the type of literature that we are reading. This is not a set of observations about a rather exotic zoo in Babylon. It is not law. It is not teaching principles for church governance. It is writing concerned with the future, with the end, what is often called apocalyptic literature. The writing suggests a picture of the end of this current age, which is full of violence and rebellion against God's ways, and a future promised peace. As we will see, it is the kind of writing that we need to be careful with, and not to go beyond what the text suggests. And if we do try and identify the beast, to do so with humility and the awareness of our own rebellion against God's ways and his loving rescue of us. I agree with Ian Duguid when he writes, "It doesn't help that some preachers who do tackle these portions of Scripture," and he has in mind these chapters in Daniel, parts of Ezekiel, and the book of Revelation, the end of, expound in lurid terms the way in which the current configuration of European or Middle Eastern states exactly fits the end-time scenario they have constructed. So come with me, if you've closed the Bibles, to Daniel chapter 7. It's on page 893 of the church Bibles. It really will help if you follow along, because we're going to look at some of the verses later after our reading too. If the Bible is too small print for you, there are some large print copies of the reading available at the back. The first verse in Daniel chapter 7 takes us back in the story of Daniel. We are taken back to the first year of Belshazzar. Remember his disdain for the warnings previously given to his family, and his death is recorded after the writing of on the wall at the end of chapter 5. So already we're going back in time before we look forwards. And now let's see these beasts, these monsters of Daniel's vision. They come from the sea, often a metaphor of chaos and rebellion against God. In verse 4, the first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. To Daniel's first readers, they would have recognized the unclean mix of animal and bird. This beast is not simply bad and dangerous, but has human characteristics and thoughts too. There is a sense of planned evil in the presentation of the beast. Now, Babylon would have been full of statues of lions, symbols of strength and power and dominance. The first is like a lion. In verse 5, a second beast looks like a bear, Raised up on one of its sides, it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." Perhaps deformed, twisted with evil, and with murderous, destructive intent. This is not a beast with an isolated one-off incident of violence. They are hungry for more. This beast causes more than injury. It brings death and destruction. Verse 6, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads and was given authority to rule. A flying leopard, combining speed and power, able to range around, the heads allowing it to look, to follow, not to let anything out of its sight. From this beast, there is no point in running. Then verse 7, a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. Daniel cannot even find the category for this 4th beast to say, well, it's a bit like one of these that you might have seen already. Not even close to anything that he has previously seen. It was different. It brought desolation, destruction. Do you notice those descriptive words? Terrifying, frightening, very powerful, crushed, devoured, trampled. All of these beasts are the stuff of nightmares. I don't know where your mind goes to when you hear these descriptions, perhaps to War of the Worlds or Lord of the Rings. And just when we think it couldn't get any stranger, there was in verse 8 another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and the 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it, and this horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. What do we think of this monstrous dream? Why is it here in the Bible? Well, Daniel chapter 7 helps us to go some way with our understanding. In verse 17, after the end of our reading, the 4 great beasts are 4 kings that will rise from the earth. Now, many people have tried to identify particular kingdoms with these beasts, like the dream that we looked at a few weeks ago back in Daniel chapter 2. Perhaps this is meant to be a similar reading of the coming destructive empires in Daniel's reading. Some are sure that one of the beasts is communism, or that the leopard was Nazi Germany. A few years ago, some were very convinced that the 10 horns were definitely the members of the European Economic Community, which was a bit awkward when membership numbers increased. Depending on your perspective, you might think that the destructive powers in our world today mean identifying Putin or Trump as one of the beasts. Earlier I said, I caution at identifying in this way, for the angel that speaks to Daniel doesn't give names for the beasts, and it is therefore not necessary for us to, in order to understand the message. The dream given shows that there are evil powers in the world, that there are forces of evil, destructive against goodness and beauty and truth, and some directly in opposition to the holy people. Now, apologies that this next bit might sound a bit technical, but let me try and share this quote from Ian Duguid and then try and explain. The identification of the beasts as 4 past empires is the exact opposite of the message of apocalyptic literature. For apocalyptic, nothing less than the beginning of the new age can change this world. Until the coming of this new age, the darkness will not lift significantly. See, the beasts stand for evil, for powerful evil in the world. And the destruction of these evil powers comes with the judgment of God. In verse 26 of Daniel 7, power will be taken away and these beasts completely destroyed forever. This type of literature is speaking about the end, and the end is not in the past. This cannot just be about former powers, as it looks for a time which is brought to an end by the wonder of God's power, which we await and to which we now turn. How different is the other vision in Daniel's dream? The difference between darkness and light. Verse 9 onwards, look down and see thrones, the Ancient of Days, clothing as white as snow, hair white like wool, throne flaming with fire, wheels all ablaze, a river of fire flowing, thousands upon thousands attending, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before. The court was seated, and the books were opened. And in verse 13, there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. What a different scene. Instead of darkness, light. Instead of chaos, order. Instead of mindless violence, righteous judgment. We are given a glimpse of a heavenly scene and see the Ancient of Days, a title for God that only appears in the book of Daniel. And as John Stott says, his appearance was as magnificent as the appearance of the monsters was horrible and ugly. There are links with Ezekiel and Revelation in these words too. And the point is to give us a picture of goodness, power, and authority which lasts. Only truly found in the goodness of God. Here from his throne, there can be a reckoning, a judgment about right and wrong. Past action and attitude are placed in the balance, and for the beasts, they are found wanting. I don't know if you've seen an example of the change in Technicolor when film moved from black and white to colour. Or perhaps you found an old family video, perhaps filmed with an expensive at the time camera, the footage from which, even though it's happy, is incredibly grainy compared with even the video now available on our mobile phones. That is a small step change compared with the vision that Daniel has of the heavenly places. It is more glorious, more wonderful than the glories of this age. And into this glorious scene walks one like a son of man, a title loved by Jesus to talk about himself. The vision is glorious, for it contains the glorious Christ. Sisters and brothers, might I encourage us not to shy away from either part of Daniel's dream, either the beasts or the thrones. John Stott, when speaking on this passage nearly 30 years ago, highlighted the importance of seeing both the beasts and the thrones, and I decided I couldn't put it any better myself, so please forgive an extended quotation. The sad thing, however, is that some Christians in their vision of reality see nothing but beasts. Their reality is filled with dragons and monsters. That's all they seem to think about, and spiritual warfare. They see stockpile armaments, environmental destruction, violent tyrannies, dehumanized technologies, and being pessimistic and doomish by temperament, they are haunted with dark forebodings. Is anyone here like that? Your reality is filled with dragons. It is right to see and to recognize the reality of evil. But it's totally wrong for Christians to be obsessed with evil. Don't you believe that the Son of Man is coming one day in power and in great glory? In the language of Daniel 7, the Most High God has ascended his throne, and moreover, the heavenly court is seated and ready to pronounce judgment, and the books of history and destiny are open. The judgment has already begun, and one day it will be completed. That is, in Daniel's language, in New Testament language, we would say, well, on the cross, Jesus both dethroned and disarmed principalities and the powers of evil. And by his resurrection and ascension and exaltation, God has vindicated his Son's triumph over evil, and God has put all things under the feet of Jesus. And in the end, all evil is going to be destroyed. Some Christians who rightly believe all that see nothing else. Their horizons are dominated by thrones everywhere. They see Jesus reigning at the right hand of the Father, but they refuse to look at the continuing harsh reality of evil, as Christians should. Where are the beasts in your vision? True, they have been defeated, but they've not yet conceded defeat, and they've not yet been destroyed. And the devil, we're told in the New Testament, still patrols the earth like a roaring lion. In a moment, we're going to sing together a hymn that is based on this chapter of Daniel, the final verse of which contains these lines. The end is not yet. The earth still has strife. New beasts roar their threats to tear out our life. But saints throughout history who serve the Most High shall fathom the mystery, shall live and not die. If you are worried about the evil in the world, know that there will be a day when all will be made right. Might these words inspire our prayers and our desire to walk closely with the one whose kingdom will never be destroyed. Amen.